climbed over your fence, had to show you that I was a man.
Hey my loves, welcome back to my channel. This is Fumi here again with another tutorial. In today's video, we're going to be doing something slightly different from what we typically do on here on my channel. For those who are new here, hello, my name is Fumi and I make videos about DIY styling. Basically, I show you how to do tiny pieces of projects in the comfort of your home all by yourself. And yeah, in today's video we're going to be doing something slightly different from what we typically do on here on this channel. So I'm going to be showing you all how to make this dress that I have on right now. So this is a shift dress that I'm wearing currently, and this is just a side to my many skills, right? This is one of the things that I'm so good at doing, and I'm just here to just share with other people that are interested in learning how to sew, basically. So going forward, I'm going to be sharing different sewing projects with you guys, how to make outfits for yourself, for your children. I'm going to be sharing tutorials, and I'm so excited about this new journey that I'm about to embark upon on here on YouTube. And I hope you guys are excited as well. I hope you guys are looking forward to, you know, seeing this side to the many skills that I always share with you guys on here on YouTube. So like I said earlier, we're going to be making this beautiful shift dress that I have on right now. This dress is so convenient and so easy to make, right? You can even make it matchy with your children, right? So if you have a daughter or, you know, nieces or just baby girls around you, you can make, you know, matching outfits like this for yourself. Or even as a business, right? You can start a ready-to-wear business from, you know, making something like this. You can just make a bunch of different shift dresses and start to sell to people. So in today's video, I'm going to be sharing this tutorial with you guys. And yeah guys, I don't want to waste too much time on this intro. Let's get straight into this tutorial. Let's go.
Alright guys, so to make your shift dress, you need a scissors, you need your tape rule for marking measurements, you need your pins for holding your fabric in place, you also need your tailor's chalk, you need some rulers, you need your hip curve, your armhole curve, your regular straight ruler, and then of course you need your fabric. The quantity of fabric you're going to be using depends on the size the size of the dress that you're making, or your own size now if you're making the dress for yourself. For me, I'm using about 2.5 yards of fabric. Also, I'm going to need some buttons because for my own dress, I'm not going to be using a zip. I'm going to be using buttons to, you know, do the neckline of my dress, but we'll see as we go. So first of all, you want to fold your fabric into 4 places, and then you're going to adjust it such that at the open edge of the fabric you have some, you know, some fabric at that edge, and that's going to serve as our zip allowance. I know I said I'm not going to be using zip for this dress, but you need some kind of allowance to create room for the button that you're going to be putting in your dress. So first of all, I'm going to start off by marking the full length of the dress. For me, I want the dress to be about 40 inches long, but then here I marked about 42 inches just for, you know, the purpose of having allowance for the dress that I'm making. I might still roll it up, or I don't know what I'm doing yet, but yeah, we'll go along and we'll see how everything goes in this tutorial. Now that I've already marked the full length of the dress that I'm going for, I'm going to start off with marking my measurements. So for the shoulder points, the very points at the top, I'm going to mark about 1 inch of, you know, 1 inch, and then draw a straight line at that point, and that's where I'm going to start marking all my measurements. So I already marked that line. Next up, I'm going to mark my bust point and then take 2 inches upwards. So that 2 inches upwards is going to serve as my armhole line. My shoulder to my bust is about 11 inches long, so I already marked that, and then I squared it out. Also, 2 inches upward will give us about 9 inches, so I marked that, and that's that top line on top of our bust point. Next up, I marked my half length, which is about 15.5 inches thereabouts, and I already marked that as well on our fabric. Next up, I'm going to be marking my shoulder to my hip point, and that's about 25 inches, and I marked that already. And once I'm done marking it perfectly, I'm going to use my ruler to just square that measurement out. The remaining length of the fabric is what is going to serve as our full length of our dress. So I'm just picking up my ruler now just to mark down my shoulder to hip point, and then we are going to move on to now start marking exact measurements on each line that we already squared out on the fabric. All right guys, so these are the lines we have now: my shoulder line, my armhole line, my bust line, my half length, and my hip line, and then the remaining part is the remaining part of our dress. So for my shoulder width is 16 inches, so I'm marking half of that plus half an inch, and I'm going to mark 8.5 inches on the shoulder point. Next up, on my armhole line, I'm going to mark my bust point divided by 4 plus 1.5 inches. So that 1.5 inches is just going to serve as ease for this dress. And then I'm going to mark that exact same measurement as well on the bust point. So the same measurements, you are going to place it on the armhole line and the bust line. We are going to solve that whole equation when we now start, getting to the point where we are drawing the exact armhole for this dress. So let's just go along. Next up, I'm marking my waist. My round waist is 32 inches, and then I added extra 2 inches to that, and that gave me about 10 inches at that point. So I added extra 2 inches just to serve as ease for this dress and also as seam allowance for the dress. For the seam allowance for this dress, we are working with 0.5 inches, half an inch. You can also use 1 inch depending on you and your preference. So for my hip point, I marked my hip. My round hip is 40 inches, and then I added 2 inches to that, and so I marked 12 inches at that point. And then I marked that exact same measurement at the end of my dress. So I connected a straight line, and then with my hip curve, I joined my waist to my hip point with my hip curve, of course, and then I'm just freestyling my hand from my bust point to my waist point. I just use a curved line kind of, and then now on my armhole line, I'm connecting that point I marked at the shoulder to the armhole line just to give me that armhole kind of effect. So this is what you use your armhole curve to draw your armhole on your dress, and then I'm just using my chalk just to perfect that curve for the armhole, and then I'm just going back in just to mark my round neck. So for the neckline for this dress, I'm using 3.5 by 3.5, and that's just what is going to typically, that's what gives me a perfect round neck for any round neck dress that I'm using. Depending on the wideness of your client's neck, you now determine whether you're going to use 4 inches or 3.5 inches or 3 inches. But for me, I'm using 3.5 by 3.5 for the front of my dress, and then I went down by 1 inch at the shoulder line just to give it that slanting effect that gives us a perfect sit for our dress at that shoulder point. Now, once that was done, I connected my neck, my round neck point to that point that I marked at 1 inch, and then drew a slanting line. Next up, I'm going to go ahead to cut out these patterns or these markings I already did on my dress, and that's exactly what I'm doing at this point, taking my time to cut my markings on my dress. But we're not going to cut all the way down because we've not marked the back yet. So for the back, for the neckline of the back, we are using 3.5 inches by 1 inch. Feel free to use 3.5 by 2 inches depending on you and what you want the neck to look like. But for this dress, I'm using 3.5 inches by 1 inch. So I'm going to mark that particular measurements on the back fabric. We folded our fabric into 4 places. So for that back point, the part that is not on fold, that's what is going to serve as our back part of this dress. And then I'm going to go ahead and then lift off this front piece slightly and then mark the markings for the round neck at the back. So I'm going to mark my 1 inch by 3.5 inches, then go ahead to cut the neckline separately. Try not to make this mistake. Be very careful when separating your dresses from each other. Mark the back, cut off the back, and then mark the front as well and cut it off separately at the neck. So just avoid forgetting and everything. You can try to just cut the dresses separately. For me, when I just started sewing, I used to make this mistake a lot, and then I'll make a mistake and cut the 2 pieces together. So what I found was I just preferred cutting my fabrics separately. You might not want to do like me. You can just cut each piece of fabric individually. While cutting the back, you use your front piece as a guideline for your back piece. But yeah, so I already marked that 3.5 inches by 1 inch for my back, and then I'm going inwards by about 7 inches from that point at the back, and then that's going to serve as ease. So when you want to wear your dress, for it to be able to pass over your head, because you're not using zip for this dress, you want to make sure there's ease for your dress to go over your head. So you're going to go inwards by about 7 inches, and then now join the fabric, the back fabric. Now you're joining it together on 1 inch, starting from that 7 inches that you marked inwards. If you guys have been understanding everything I've been saying, please give this video a big fat thumbs up so I know that you guys are enjoying this tutorial. So this is me marking that 7 inches point, and then I'm going to start sewing from that point all the way down. I also marked my 1 inch allowance, and this is it now. I also went ahead to do a zigzag stitch at the edge of my fabric because I don't have a serger, so my zigzag part of my sewing machine is what is going to help me kind of weave the edge of my fabric, and that's the back. Next up, I'm going to be turning the neckline with a piece of bias. So this is what we call bias in tailoring, and it's just meant for doing different things on fabric, especially turning necklines or turning armholes, depending on what you are going for with whatever outfit you are making. So this is the bias now, and then I'm pinning it on the neckline of this my dress, gently with my pin, just going all around. And once that is pinned, I'm going to repeat it on the second, the second side of this my dress that I'm making, and then I'm going to go ahead to pin like I said. Alright guys, so while pinning, make sure that at each edge of each piece that you pin together, you have at least 1 inch or half inch of excess bias, and we're going to see why I left that excess bias at the edges of the neckline that we are turning. So what you're going to do now is you're going to sew at that point where your bias kind of folds over. You're going to place the bias on the front, the right side of your fabric, and then sew it all the way down on that line. So what we are going to do now is, I found that my excess bias was too much, so I'm cutting it off at the edges. And then, alright guys, this is how you're going to fold the excess bias that you left on your fabric. So you're going to fold it in just the way I did, and then fold it over inwards to the wrong side of your fabric, and then you're going to sew as close to the edge of your bias as possible. So I usually advise that you pin your bias in place, especially if you're a beginner. Pinning in place is going to help your work come out really nice and really neat as well. So I'm just folding over that excess at the other side of this my neckline as well, folding it like this. I might not be able to explain it properly, just watch how I'm folding it over, and then I'm now going to fold it to the wrong side of my fabric and pin in place as well. So once all this is done, I'm now going to take my dress to my sewing machine and then sew it as close to the edge of the bias as possible. Try not to move your hands and then make your sewing not neat. Try to keep your hands as steady as possible. I know, especially if you're a beginner, it might be a bit difficult to keep your hands steady while sewing your bias in place. So just what I advise is just take it slow and steady. Don't be too fast. Don't try to rush the whole process on your sewing machine. So this is what your neckline is supposed to look like once you've done that. This is what it looks like on the wrong side, and this is what it looks like on the right side. So this is what is going to serve as my buttonhole for my dress, or my button loop, and this fabric is about 5 inches by 1.5 inch or 1/4 inch, depending on you, but don't make it more than 5 inches by 1.5 inches. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to pipe this fabric. First of all, iron it. I already ironed this, and this is what the piped version looks like. Next up, I'm going to sew as close to the edge of this my piped fabric as possible, and then now attach it to the neckline of that back piece. So we are still working with the back of our dress. Once that is done, on the other side of this your loop that you already sewed and attached to your dress, you're going to sew your button, and that's how the buttonhole and the loop for the back of our dress will be done. So we are going to start working on the front of this our dress, and what I'm going to do first of all is to turn the neckline just the way we did with the back. I'm going to turn the neckline with this piece of bias strip, and as usual, I'm going to start off by pinning my bias in place, leaving some excess just for folding in the bias and just making the finishing of this our bias strip neat when sewing. And this is what we have here. Next up, I'm going to sew it, and this is what the front of our dress looks like. So it's time for us to join the two pieces of fabric. So the front and the back, we're going to join it together to give us a full-blown dress. So what I'm doing now is I'm placing the front of my dress on the back of my dress, and you want it to be right sides facing each other, and so this part facing us now is the wrong side. Next up, I'm going to mark like 1/2 inch all around the dress. Depending on you and the amount of sewing allowance you allotted for your dress, mark that sewing allowance. For me, I'm working with 1/2 inch, so I'm marking 1/2 inch all through the sides seam of my dress. And once I'm done marking that allowance, I'm going to go ahead to sew on the allowance that I already placed for my dress. If you've been enjoying this video so far, please give the video a big fat thumbs up. Also, let me know in the comment section if you enjoyed. This is my very first sewing tutorial on my channel, and I'm still very nervous around it. With time, I'm sure I'm going to get very comfortable making these types of tutorial for you guys. So next up, I'm going to mark 1/2 inch also on the shoulder line of my dress, and once that is marked, I'm going to go ahead to join the shoulders of my dress together, and this is what we have here. Our dress is getting ready to be finished. If you want your dress to be a armless dress, you can stop here and just turn the armhole of your dress with a bias strip and you're done. But because I want my dress to have sleeves, I'm going to now start working on the sleeves. So for making sleeves, you're going to first of all measure the armhole of your dress. So just the way I'm placing my tape rule like this. You place your tape rule starting from the edge of the armhole and then take it all around and make sure you're getting a perfect measurement. For me, I got 9.5 inches when I went ahead to measure my armhole, the allowance I have for my armhole. Next up, I'm just taking some pieces of fabric because this my tutorial that I'm doing, I was doing serious stingy cocoa with my fabric because the fabric was just 2.5 yards and I needed it to be enough for the entire dress. So what I'm doing here is just putting the two fabrics that I'm going to be using for the sleeve of this my dress, putting them together on fold. Once that is done, you're now going to mark your starting point for your sleeve. So with most measurements, you make sure you have like a guideline. That line is where you now start to mark other measurements on. So this is my guideline now, and I'm marking that 9.5 inches that I found when I measured my armhole on this my guideline, and then I'm going to draw a straight line on that 9.5 inches. So on that line that you drew at the side, measure 5 inches and then mark it. Then at the top of that your guideline towards the fold, mark about 2 or 2.5 inches, and that's going to serve as the cap of your sleeve. Next up, you're going to draw like a curved line. The line looks like letter S, like a slight letter S, like a letter S that is lazy. So you're going to now draw that line starting from that 5 inches that you marked at the other side to that 2.5 or 2 inches that you marked at the cap of your sleeve. And then next up, you're now going to mark your bicep measurements. My round bicep now is about 14 inches. So I added 1 extra inch to it and then I marked it on my fabric. And then now I'm going to connect that my 5-inch point to that my round sleeve or bicep measurements, and then this is what we have now. Next up, I'm going to go ahead to cut my sleeve starting from the folded points or starting from the bottom. It all depends on you, so make sure that you are careful and make sure that you mark the appropriate measurements. Cutting the wrong sleeve can make or mar your dress, so make sure that you are measuring appropriate measurements when taking measurements for attaching your sleeve. So next up, I'm going to notch the points, that folded point of my sleeve, so that it will help me out when I'm trying to connect my sleeve to my dress. Next up, I'm going to go ahead to join that my sleeve from that extra allowance that I added, that 1 inch allowance that I added to my bicep. I'm going to fold my fabric over, right side facing each other, and then connect it and then join it together on 1 inch. Next up, I'm going to roll my sleeve just to tidy up the edge of the sleeve. So I'm just rolling it twice on 1/2 inch and then pinning it in place. I'm going to repeat the same thing on this second sleeve as well. Roll it twice on 1/2 inch and then take it to my sewing machine and sew as close to the edge of that my rolled fabric as possible. After sewing, you might see that some parts on the sleeve might be poking out. Just feel free to just do a light trim and you'll be good to go. So what I'm doing now is I'm attaching my sleeve to my dress. So what I always advise people to do is, first of all, attach the seam line of your sleeve to the seam line of your dress. So the side seam, attach that seam where you joined together, where you join your sleeve together, attach it to the seam line, the side seam of your dress. Also attach that point that you notched at the cap of your sleeve. Now attach it to that your shoulder point of your dress, and then now start to attach the remaining part of your sleeve. I hope what I'm saying makes sense to you guys, but yeah, I'm sure by the time you start making your project at home, everything I'm saying will make sense to you. So I'm just attaching that joined point, so the seam line of my sleeve, I'm attaching it to the side seam of my dress, pinning it together, of course, and I'm also going to go ahead to attach the shoulder to the cap of my sleeve and then now start to pin all around. If you measured everything appropriately, this sleeve is supposed to fit your dress perfectly. No crinkling or gathering or looking weird anyway. Everything is supposed to sit perfectly on your sleeve. And once that is done, you're now going to take the sleeve and your dress to your machine and then attach your sleeve to your dress, and that's pretty much it. At the point where you now take your sleeve and your dress to your machine to connect them together, also just take out that time to also roll the edge of your dress. So for me, because I left about 1.5 inches of allowance for the ends of my dress, so the edge of my dress, that's the amount of allowance I put for my dress, I'm just going to go ahead to fold over my dress at the edge by 1.5 inches, fold in 1/2 inch first and then fold another 1 inch afterwards, and then sew it all around, and that will be it for the edge of my dress. So this is my sleeve now. After pinning, I'm about to take it to my sewing machine to sew, and this is what my sleeve looks like. Everything looks smooth and it just looks professionally made. Also, this is a good time to do trimmings. Anywhere you see threads, sticking out in your dress, take your scissors and then just cut as carefully as possible. And that's it, guys. I also already took the time to fold my dress inwards and then tidy up the hem of my dress. And now what I'm going to do now is just do a little bit of hand stitching to attach my button to my dress, and that'll be it for this tutorial, guys. I hope you guys enjoyed this, my very first debut in making dresses on here on my channel. If you thoroughly enjoyed it, please be sure to give this video a big fat thumbs up. Also, if you're yet to subscribe to my channel, please do well to join my family. I do a lot of DIY tutorials where I share beautiful tutorials with you guys, so please be sure to join us. And yeah, guys, I can't wait to see you in my next tutorial. Love and appreciate every single one of you. Bye. Mwah.